He was a man of great depth, we can be certain of that. A man who made enemies, yet was not slain by them. I think there is a lesson there. Whatever you thought of his methods, you sit here in this glorious city because of him, because Constans was true to his word in these matters. So for that, we must be thankful. And I know that my brother Julianus would say the same, were he able to be present here today. What of your other brother? Oh, Uther, is that you? I didn't think... Yes, it is I. Julianus indeed could not be here, but nor does he send his regards. Julianus has no time for matters not profitable to him, and so he remains in the field. You may scorn him for it, however that same trait was the bedrock of the character we supposedly mourn today. Uther, I don't think you should be speaking on this matter. This is not your concern. Come, let us speak in private. No, let me say something. I've travelled far to pay my respects, and I must be heard by all here, by your gods and mine. You all saw the sign, didn't you? The darkening of the sky? They say that Mars threw his cloak over Sol so that your hero might fall into that final sleep with greater ease. They say that. But where I am from, there are certain facts which are known more widely. Facts that reveal the true nature of this sign, of this warning. Uther, please, come on. The Lord is telling us that a calamity is coming, greater than the death of Constans. Famine is already spreading, but there shall be war, great war, across all the world. Listen to me! Uther, get down! What are you talking about? Britannia is dark in the eyes of the Lord. He will not save those who scorn him. You will see. Remember my words. Remember I warned you. That's it. Sorry, everyone. Long journey from Gaul. Now, serve the food. Now, go on. Very good. Hello there and welcome to Fields of Mars episode 38. Last time we were being annoyed by the Garamantians who kept putting us under siege. We eventually destroyed most of their forces, but all that sieging action distracted us from the fact that the Sassanids were having their way with our nearby garrison in another settlement, so that didn't go very well and we lost the settlement in the end. We were also trying to hunt down Attila, being hampered by the fact he kept running away and by the fact the Huns had so much strength it was really dangerous. Septimus got serious and destroyed Nicomedia to protect Thracia from the constant threats of Sassanid invasions. We saw an eclipse which seemed to signal some sort of bad omen, and it in fact came with the death of both Constans and Attila. So following up from that, Julianus is now taking his chance to go on an offensive against the Huns, and we're facing them in this battle. I expected this battle to be a fort battle. The enemy were fortified, or at least it looked like they were, on the campaign map, and it ended up being a field battle, which was a bit confusing, but I thought, well, we'll just try it anyway. I was planning to try and basically exploit the fact the enemy were in a fort to use the fact that Julianus has a couple of onagers to try and destroy as much of their army as possible before the fight started. Instead, we're doing the opposite right now, where the enemy are firing their onagers at us, and we are, of course, just going to force them to fire at something worthless so they waste all their ammo and try and minimize the casualties by running around. Someone was complaining about me using this exploit, but I feel absolutely fine using it as an exploit, especially against the Huns, because of course they get these large onagers, which are an elite late game unit for free, and they get them in large numbers, so them being on the field is a counter exploit, so I'm fine to at least weaken them in this fashion. Now, the Huns, as usual, get bored of waiting. We are technically the attacker, but they decide to come and attack us, and now our archers will start firing at them. And a nice thing about this battlefield is that it seemed to be particularly flammable. It had lots of grass on the ground, and that meant these flaming shots did more damage than usual, although as you can see, the fire does no subsequent damage to all the units walking through it, which is a shame. So it's a little bit less powerful than it looks, but still pretty powerful. When it hits a nice flammable spot, it can just immolate entire units at once, and I'm pretty sure we got hundreds of kills here and halved the strength of entire units as they came in by just setting everything on fire. Really, really effective attacks. Unfortunately, with damage done by fire, it doesn't count as a kill for the onager, so you can't actually log how much damage it did. You just have to guess, basically, but it looked like it was extremely effective, so that's nice. The enemy's archers already doing a number on our ranged units there as we try and fire back at them, and the rest of their army coming in for a fight. They have a pretty normal army, lots of just infantry and not all that much cav, so a pretty regular engagement, but here is a big problem. One of my onagers was targeted onto one of their melee units. It attacked us, and then my onager destroyed both sides, setting the ground on fire and just destroying like 75% of both units in one hit. Super effective, but just as effective against me as it is against them, so that was particularly nasty. The enemy's melee cavalry, which is pretty good, was slowly hacking its way through my spears on the right flank, so I had to put in my own cavalry to try and help out in a somewhat desperate move. On the left flank, things much more clear, and I've actually got this unit of war dogs, which I'm releasing now to go towards the enemy's back lines. Another unit of cav there trying to take on some enemy half-dead melee cav, basically just distracting them so that all of these war dogs can now go and maraud their way through the enemy's horse archers. Horse archers are kind of countered by war dogs, and at the very least it distracts them and stops them firing at you, and the war dogs will do okay in a melee against the horses, so that's quite nice. So that's going to save a lot of lives, most likely on our side. We are though still taking a lot of damage just because the Hunnic regular infantry is really good, even against legionaries, which are themselves really good. It's not going very well. It's really a bloody engagement with both sides probably taking equal losses. We have the numerical advantage, so we can start to surround them, but look at what happens to this unit of Western Auxilia Palatina when they try to flank attack this unit of Bosphoran infantry. I didn't think Bosphoran infantry were all that special, but if you look at the numbers of our unit, they just decline instantly. They seem to just wipe out our unit in mere seconds after the melee begins, even though we were flank attacking them. I don't know how these guys are so powerful, but it's not very nice. We were just trying to get a morale debuff on them, but it wasn't working. Had to throw in a second unit because the first unit routed instantly, but basically we do have enough men that we can gradually grind through the enemy in a very bloody engagement, and eventually they'll start to leave due to army losses. You can see on the balance bar that we've basically taken out everything else. All of their archers and their cavalry were destroyed by our dogs and cavalry and some infantry units who'd rushed forward to exploit the fact that some of the enemy's line was completely annihilated by those onager attacks, so it was kind of easy to break through in other places. And there we have it really. The balance bar says it all. The general dies right at the end here, and that's going to seal the deal. The remaining enemy infantry will simply leave, and that's going to be a victory. So it came a little bit harder than expected, and in a pretty different battle to what I expected. However, now that Attila is dead, all of these really powerful elite units that we're taking down will not respawn for free, so any victory is good at any price at this stage. Abandoned by my own brother. Yes, truly he was worthy of being the Senate's favourite rogue. But even alone, I saw the faith my men had in me, and knew that nothing would stop us. The Hun, breaking camp suddenly and attacking without warning, as I had predicted, walked directly into one of history's great fire attacks. They trawled through the undergrowth, desperate to reach our line, but were suddenly engulfed in roaring flames, rising with but a single motion of my finger. The light of those flames was apt to purge the darkness these men had wrought, and all Romans present cheered heartily, praising Mars for this stroke of genius on their general's part. All that remains is to do this again and again until the Hun is no more. Now, despite the friendly fire incidents, really things look okay in terms of what's left of our army. It's just the units that had to fight with the enemy's last couple of elite infantry that really took damage there, and by taking on warriors we can heal some of the damage from that. So overall the army's still in decent-ish condition, just lacking really the front line element, which you could say is the most important element. The problem we have is that the Huns have a much more Hunnish army right next to that one we just defeated, so we don't want to do anything too aggressive right now. My goal is to take out that nearby settlement if I can and sit Julianus in it, because I can use that to replenish to go further on and take out more Hun armies nearby. But for now he is just going to sit there and wait through the winter, and we're going to skip on to another battle with Anicius. He had this settlement with the Sassanids inside under siege, and they're basically sallying out, and they have a big advantage. They have two full armies, the second one just being a load of spears, and the first one being a classic Sassanid force, elephants, cataphracts, and crossbow cav. Now this looks hard, but I decided that Anicius doesn't really understand what's so hard about it, being someone who's not particularly interested in strategy, so he's just going to do it anyway and literally see what happens. So because of that we are fighting this battle, and things get started pretty well actually, and it comes from the enemy's formation. They put their elephants in front of their army, and that means what we can do is have all of our front line not be in the classic stationary testudo the whole time, just because the enemy's archers aren't going to come in first to pepper us, so we don't have to protect ourselves so much from archery fire. That allows us to throw Pilaf forwards to take out these slow-moving elephants super fast, and they all go down pretty much immediately. So that is great. Those elephants are going to be pretty much no threat at all now. They're going to run amok, and the front line can now put their shields up and start receiving all of that crossbow cav fire and the cataphract charges, both of which are somewhat countered by testudos. The weakness of the testudo, of course, is that you can't move, and the enemy can just go around you if they want. Luckily, they don't really want to most of the time. The AI does like to attack your front line if you give them something to attack, so they will, but they did send a couple of units to outflank us. Luckily, I had stuff back here defending the flanks, kind of imagining already that this would happen, so we now can engage them and lock them in place, but those aren't necessarily engagements we'll win with our cavalry, because the enemy cavalry is better. Anicius himself getting drawn into the fight with the Praetorians, that should tilt it in our favour. Lots of pressure being put on the right and the centre by the rest of the enemy's army. This unit clearly recently being almost defeated by some camels, so they must have gotten rid of soon enough. And here's another unit trying to break through our line here, but as they do, they're taking big casualties. They're trying to get back out again. That's not going to be very nice for them, and it looks like our line is just about going to hold out there, and the casualties on our side not too high either. Second enemy army coming in. The enemy has attacked with one army at a time, which makes life much easier for us. Our spearmen on the left having a bit of trouble, not only because the enemy's cavalry is so good that having a bonus against cavalry doesn't exactly seal the deal in these fights, but because the enemy's crossbow cav is here. This crossbow cav is basically just glitching out, which is quite nice for us and doing loads of tiny movement orders. But one thing I have done since whenever it was we last fought the Sassanids is I have custom modded the game in order to reduce the firing rate of Sassanid cavalry in an attempt to balance them out somewhat. Basically they had a firing rate of about 70 to 75 from the regular to elite versions, whereas regular crossbows would be something like 45 to 50 and a regular bow was 55 to 60. So I don't know why that unit in particular was so high, but that was why they had automatic weapons. So basically I've toned them down so they have the reload speed of a regular foot crossbow, and basically just left all the other stats the same. So they'll still be powerful, but hopefully now we'll apply that power over a much longer time and be less immediately devastating. Here you can see some enemy cataphracts being very generous. They kind of rode right through our crossbows and didn't do anything. Our crossbows completely indifferent to the affair. I don't know if they had some sort of arrangement going on there, but that's good. I guess we avoided losing that whole unit of crossbows, which we probably should have there. Now on the left flank, we're starting to finally win the cavalry battle, the last of our cav going in to finish off the last of theirs, and Anicius, coming back to the centre, finds himself very slowly rear-attacking this unit of cataphracts, which is just ignoring him. So there's a strange battle of indifference going on back there, which we should win in the end. But the enemy's second army is now coming in, absolutely swarming our front line with spearmen, and they've also got lots of these Kurdish archers. They do lots of damage and are kind of hard to kill as well, because they're technically a melee unit as well. So difficult situation to deal with. The enemy's depth of rank here, probably like 50 men, ours like 2, but the enemy loses their general at this point, and all of these Sassanid spears aren't going to have good morale, so that's going to make life way easier. With that done, all we need to do is just try and rear attack them, and even at relatively full strength you can shatter one of the Sassanid spear units now that they don't have their general, so this is going to start turning the battle basically from this point onwards. Now here's a little look again at the Sassanid crossbow cav. I'm just trying to see if their rate of fire really is lower. And it seems like maybe it is. They're still firing kind of fast. They're not actually all firing in this case, which makes it a bit harder to work it out. But it should be lower, and they do have an ability that increases their rate of fire by 50%, so it's possible they were using it at that point to make it look like they were firing faster. I did test the mod that I did a little bit, and it seemed to work, but still not entirely sure. Anyway, for now, I'm just sending the cavalry around to take out all these archers at the back, loads of them, and as I said, kind of hard to take down because they're heavily armoured. They've got a sword and shield, and fight as a melee unit once you get close to them. But we have so much stuff here, we'll just overwhelm the balance bar. Looking good now. A few of our units can go to a rear attack. All of these spears still engaged against our line, and they're going to be destroyed, not necessarily by the attacks, but their morale will be destroyed at the very least. And then as they start to run away, they're going to be sitting ducks for everything we have to just completely annihilate them. And we did have lots of time to cut them down because I had to chase off the crossbow cav who took ages to rout, ended up chasing them halfway across the map. But the battle ends eventually in a heroic victory, and you can see by just looking at the ground that this has been a nice result. Sassanid bodies absolutely everywhere, an amazing first battle for Anicius.
A speech about what? Let's skip that. Why tell the men that we won? They'll work it out one of these days. Let's just get back to camp. Too hot here. Way too hot. Go on. This is all so much easier than everyone thinks. Or maybe most people are just stupid about it. Don't see no issue with all this. Why do we need big generals anyway? All you grunts do is tell me what to do, so why not just lead yourself? You'd save me a lot of trouble. Just too ugly under the helmet, huh? Oh, I forgot how long it took to get here. Battles closer to the camp next time. In the camp, maybe. Put the couches atop a platform and fight around it. Civilized, that would be. Reasonable. It would be more like a show. People go on and on about the horrors of battles. Could at least try to make some good of it.
We managed to avoid losing any whole units, so that is great. We'll be able to get our army back to full strength soon enough. I'm just checking over the kills, noting our range units did pretty well, so did the cav. And the real thing to wonder is what their crossbow cav did to us in that fight. And really, not very much. Normally they get hundreds of kills, although the stationary Studo was of course used pretty much throughout the fight, so even with their fast rate of fire they probably wouldn't have done all that much. So we'll still have to experiment to see if this is really having any major effect on the Sassanids' strength. So that siege will now continue. Some of the enemy survived, so we'll have to take them out again in a future turn. You can see there the Sassanids also have a whole bunch of fleets trying to sail up towards Alexandria over land. Not quite working, so they're all just stuck in the corner. And now the Huns have an offer for us. They're asking for peace. We have to pay them for it. An interesting proposition because it would free up our forces quite a lot. But you can see I'm just looking over their traits as a faction, and it seemed pretty clear to me that we wouldn't be at peace for very long if we got peace. So I might as well continue the war and try to finish them off. And speaking of finishing them off, Anicius just going to kill the last of those Sassanids there, no big deal. Now moving on once again, the Garamantians declare war on us for the billionth time, so that's nice I guess. I thought we might get a little bit longer at peace with them, so that means that Alexandria is probably going to be put under pressure again, and you can see they've got a lot of forces coming into Iberia to fight the Western Roman Empire, and losing by the looks of things, so that's a good start to this conflict. We can see the enemy's losing troops all over the place, and a little bit later, once the snows in Europe had cleared up, I was coming here to attack the Huns at last once again, but we've got some interesting news. Abgasia has converted to Greco-Roman paganism, so that is very good. Finally someone getting in on our side. An odd choice because they are aligned against us and their main base is very far away, but you can see they have territory in northern Italia and in Gaul, so I guess there's some local Greco-Roman paganism tradition there, and they're just being influenced by the fact they border with our own territory. So that's nice. It had almost no impact on our diplomatic relations. I thought it might make them friendly towards us, but not really. Anyway, Julianus, now having escaped the winter, can move on to continue his plan of just capturing this Hun settlement to rebuild his army up to full strength. Now, the Huns in this campaign are glitched. They're not even able to take settlements normally. It's a side effect of a mod, I think, but when they take these settlements, they can't build anything in them because the Huns don't have any buildings in the game. So they've basically just got a few empty ruins, which we will now have to build up to make them of any use to us, but at least they're not of any use to them either. Kind of strange because the Huns did have a gigantic land empire in real life. They're just forced to always be a horde in the game for whatever reason. So with that sorted, the Huns are getting a bit weaker technically. Really, we need to take on their armies in order to remove their strength, and most of those armies are just sitting here in our territory. We're just kind of waiting for them to defortify and move somewhere so we can attack them when they're in a bit of a weaker position with Aurelianus. And Anicius coming to clear up the Lackbids who are sitting in the mouth of the River Nile once again, basically doing the same thing that Constans had to keep doing. The Lackbids, lots of failed invasions, and that's just another one from them. Now some very interesting news indeed. The Varinians, this tiny tribe in Eastern Europe, sitting on the edge of the destroyed sector that the Huns created, suddenly declares war on us out of nowhere. Hadn't really had any contact with them at all before, but they were allied to the Alamans, and the Alamans joined them in the war. So that's the real event that's happening here, because the Alamans control most of Europe. Just before that, I had this little annoying situation to look at where some Celtic separatists were now besieging Verona, and they only had a couple of units, so I just told the garrison to sally, and they ran away, dying of attrition on the way. But it's just annoying because the fact they had it under siege and I couldn't do anything about it until now has damaged all the buildings, so now I have to start repairing stuff, and disease seems to be spreading in there as well, so that's not nice. So basically here, we can see there are now hostile settlements absolutely everywhere. We're possibly going to have some big trouble here because the Almans do control a massive amount of territory, and that territory borders our territory basically everywhere, so they can now come at us from unexpected directions and attack undefended sectors, including Britannia, which has no defences whatsoever right now because we simply can't afford it. You can see from the finances at the top that we are in a little bit of a situation when it comes to money. We need to lose some forces somewhere. I just thought I'd look at the diplomacy map to basically show the attitudes of the world towards us and highlight the fact that we're surrounded by enemies. The Gaetulians, who hate us, actually aren't at war with us, so that's nice, but otherwise all the dark red is going to be our enemies and the lighter red are people who might be our enemies, including the Alamans now, who have just become our enemy and are going to go dark red very soon. We are very much surrounded. Of course it is war. It was foretold and warned of, and here we are. The Senate has raised no additional forces, and obviously listens not to any hint of the Lord's wisdom. And the brunt of it will fall on two groups, the helpless people of Britannia and us. At last we join our brothers in the old empire fighting these barbarians. We shall be forced to face the pagans outside our ranks before those within can be considered. We will take what scant men our provisions can afford, and we shall march to place our shields in the sand, ready to break the inbound tide. All that we do not have will be made up for, if we are true to the Lord, and to ourselves, to our people, and our mission. The fate of the world is to be saved one day. The light gives power for the taking. Indeed, Uther is going to have to make some immediate preparations because the Alamans' armies are currently on our borders. They've been fighting with the Western Roman Empire and recently have basically pushed them back, bringing them right up to our border. But one advantage we do have is that our border is along a river there, or at least has a river in the middle of it, so we can use that as a defensive line for now. The Alamans could also come through the Alps or through the desolate territory left by the Huns, but I'm going to consider that to be much less likely given that they've been focusing in Gaul against the Western Roman Empire, so all their armies are probably around there. So I'm just going to imagine at least that they're not going to bother attacking from other directions for now. Against the Huns, we can finally start taking some of their armies down because they did split up and allow us to take them on without them reinforcing each other here. Our little backup army of inferior units that's been following Aurelianus around, basically a little Senate army that doesn't do all that much except just defend territories and kill rebels, is now going to actually play a starring role in finishing off that little Hun army with the help of a local garrison. So that all went well and good. He's going to have to get out of the way now because there's a giant rebel army right there, which he probably doesn't want to fight right now, and he can just go and do public order duties. So against the other two armies, or really 1.5 armies, I'm pretty sure Aurelianus could probably take them, even if he has to fight them at the same time. So we're going to be a little bit less conservative now. We'll just go after them and put ourselves right in the open, and they may just both come together and attack us, and if they do, that's probably fine. Now, I just wanted to show you something in case anyone was wondering what exactly the diplomatic situation is regarding peace. Basically, every couple of turns I go around and just offer everyone at war with peace, because we are at war with far too many people. We can't afford to be at war in every direction as we are now, because we can't afford the men, and of course we can't afford to have the constant strategic weaknesses of having to worry about being attacked from various angles which otherwise are undefended, and of course they always reject the notion of peace. So our new enemy, the Garamantians, is going to have to be fought entirely by Eutropius there with this half stack of Western Auxilia Palatina, so we're pretty much hoping the Garamantians don't really come into this war very much. They may of course do what they did last time, which is focus on going for Alexandria, but Anicius does not care one iota about that possibility and doesn't even really care about the possibility of the Sassanids attacking from the east. He is going to go quite a long way away to go and take Berenice down to the south, just because that is part of Egyptus, the province, so taking that will somewhat stabilize what territory we have, and of course we need to start taking territory because we don't have enough money to support our empire right now. Septimus also has some opportunities to potentially go on the offensives against the Sassanids, because it seems that right now they have very light forces on their front line with us here. They've got half a stack in this settlement and there's another half stack over to the right there, but that one's taking attrition right now. So basically I thought we might be able to actually sneaky go take a settlement, preferably the walled settlement, and then just sit inside it. In both cases massive garrisons are available, so there's a lot of infantry to get through. However, that attrition that's affecting the walled settlement is very interesting. I'm basically thinking here that if we just wait a couple of turns, we might be able to just step over there and auto-resolve. What we don't want to do is lay it under siege the whole time, because that'll give the Sassanids opportunities to just suddenly come at us out of the fog of war with some more armies and do what they usually do. So I'm hoping that by not getting too close for now, it won't attract too much attention, but we'll still be within range to very cheekily push in and just take the settlement when it's available. But before any of that, of course, the Alamans are going to get their turn. They do go first in the end turn sequence, and they are going to make a move right away, coming at Uther. So the move towards the river was the correct one. They are going to come down into Aquitania, and they're coming at us with a lot of ranged units. This army group they've got is really damaged, and a lot of the damage is on their melee units. So that's pretty good, especially because their melee units are way better than ours, so we really need that. But with all those ranged units, they're still going to be pretty powerful, and they do get that advantage on the balance bar. We're going to get our reinforcements from Burdagala, so that's going to help out a little bit, or it may at least, depending on where they come in and when. And of course we're going to have the river. That's the important part, just checking here that we are getting a river here. Since the enemy are mostly ranged units, they may be able to negate that river defense advantage by just shooting over it. We'll just have to see. Overall, this is probably the best sort of battle we can hope for in the circumstances. The Senate and the military officials leading Roman forces were surely feeling the pressure that had crushed their predecessors. More so perhaps, for the border the Romans needed to defend was discontinuous, without much mutual coordination or support, especially between the traditional and new branches in Iberia and Italia respectively. But that disunity at least allowed for quick decision making, and inspired officers wanting to make a name for themselves to act without discussion. Thus Julianus made good on his promises to push back the Huns, Anicius made an almost leisurely job of expanding and securing his father's efforts in Africa, and Uther rallied his broken people against the force that the rest of the empire had been running from for years. So that is it for this episode. Thank you so much for watching. We'll have that battle and more against the Alamans, plus the results of our various offensives across the world in the next episode of Fields of Mars.